Such an awesome God. 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 Such an awesome.
A 3-year-old was sitting in the waiting room at the doctor's office, and a pregnant woman walked in and sat right next to him. And he was just amazed, and he kept looking at her belly. And finally he got up the nerve to ask her. He said, "Ma'am, why is your tummy so big?" She told him it was because she had a baby inside. He looked at her and he said, "Is it a good baby?" She said, "Yes, it's a good baby." He said, "Well, why did you eat him?" Well, great morning and welcome to Lakestone Chapel. We are bringing the gospel to life, and it's so good to see all of you. I pray that you had a great week. And we read from Proverbs this morning, and I want to talk to you more specifically about training up a child. I'm sure that you've heard about what happened in Florida. And I know that seems so far away, but it affects all of us. And while we don't know these children, I don't know if anybody here knows any of these children or the teachers that lost their lives. I did read some of their stories, and I can't help but think that's us. That's us. It's not so far away when you get to know the people, the situations. And, you know, I'm a pastor. I'm called to preach and to tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ. But at times like this, it gets hard. It gets difficult. And even pastors have a tough time. And I got to let you know, because I already mentioned, that my grief was so heavy this week that it was very hard to focus. As a matter of fact, I mentioned to her this morning, this is probably the toughest message I ever had to do, only because I was so full of grief. It was so hard to concentrate. I actually contacted one of the elders in our denomination. I said, "Brother, I need prayer, because I spent several days trying to get my mind wrapped around a message, and all I could think about, all I could see were the faces of those kids." And so what God reminded me, he said, you know, that he hasn't changed. He said, "I don't waver." And he said, "Neither should your faith."
Thank you, Lord.
Amen?
Amen.
And with that, I began to get my wind back and my strength back. You see, these atrocities in Florida, these are not God's desires.
That's right.
They're not. And so a fair question may come up, and it's what people often have at a time like this. If God is all powerful, if he's all knowing, why didn't he stop it? One simple word from God and that gun would have jammed. Even blew up in that own kid's face. If he had a death wish, why didn't God just take him? Why? Why, God? Why? And so why didn't he? Why did he allow this to happen? And the simple truth is, the simple answer is, we don't know. Right? One thing we do know is that we can't let even this deter us from our faith.
That's right. Amen.
See, if we do that, as long as we hold to the truth and to our faith, even when the grieving is over and the pain subsides, we'll realize that through the process we become stronger. Turn to somebody and say, "You're getting stronger." I don't know anybody who likes to go through difficult times. I sure don't.
Right.
But one thing is certain, if we live long enough, all of us are going to have a tough season. We're all going to have times when the heartache feels so bad that we don't know how we're possibly going to make it to the next day. We don't like that. Back when I was working as an aircraft designer, I learned some things about physics. It helped me understand God a little bit better. The reason that birds fly, the reason that airplanes fly, is that there is more force lifting than there's weight pushing it down. And as long as you can get those things happening, you can make anything fly. I'll tell you, you know, Lockheed, we made things fly that just ain't supposed to fly. You look at them and go, how does that thing get? We'll have to probably take that out the tape. But I learned that if you apply the right principle, if there's more lift than there is weight, you're going to get it in the air. Sounds easy, doesn't it? Until you start trying to design around those principles. Then you realize how strong an airplane has to be, and at the same time it has to be as light as possible or it will never get off the ground. And so from a design standpoint, we had to design the thing strong but light. Somebody say strong but light.
Strong but light.
There are a lot of materials that we could use that are known for their strength. At the same time, they're very light. So we begin our selection process, selecting the right metals, the right materials, the right composites. But the next problem we face is that the very thing that makes that material, that metal usable, makes it impossible to form. You take a piece of aluminum or a piece of steel that's too hard and you go to form it and it breaks. Or it becomes so stressed in the process that it's going to break the minute it's put under load. The last thing you want to do is put a part on an airplane that's going to break when you need it to be strong. And so the way we get around that, the way we get to the properties that we need, is to start with a weaker metal. Some of you look at me like, well, how does that work? I'm going to explain it to you. See, the way we can cut it, shape it, form it, get it to do what we want it to do is we start with a softer metal, and then after it's been formed, it's still not finished. We've got to get that metal to its proper hardness or it's never going to work. And the way we do that, depending on the material, is we put it into a very hot, fiery furnace. We get it so hot, almost to the point where it yields and it starts to melt. And then we leave it there, sometimes overnight. We come back in the morning, cool it off, and then test it for strength. And finally, that material now has all the properties that it needs to do its job. It started off weak, pliable, but now it's found the strength. And the reason that it found its strength, the reason that that works, is because something happened to it in the fire. You see, the fire caused that metal. There was a reason why the metal was soft and pliable in the first place, because it had impurities in it. And something happened in the fire, in the heat of the fire, that caused that material to let go of the impurities. And once the impurities are gone from it, the metal is pure, and in its pure state, it's stronger than it was before it went into the fire.
Amen.
Somebody tell your neighbor and say it's the same way with us.
It's the same way with us.
Are you with me this morning? We start out pliable, we're movable, we're soft, we're shapeable, we're formable. We have all these ideas and thoughts that seem right, many of which didn't come from God. Hello? Those are weaknesses in our character, but thankfully God doesn't discard us because we're soft, we're weak, because we're not doing things His way. Instead, what happens is we find ourselves in a fiery furnace. Where the impurities and those things that He wants to strip away are released.
Yes.
Sometimes it feels so bad we think we'll never get through. Then all of a sudden that season subsides and we're found stronger than we ever were before. People ask me today, preacher, how do you know God is real? I'm going to tell you how I know, because I've been through the fire. And when I came out, there's nobody on earth that can tell me God isn't real.
Amen.
You see, at that time, Miss Sharita, God knew way back when I was a teenager that He was making a preacher.
Amen.
And that preacher had to show by his faith that nothing wavers. Nobody can convince him that God isn't real. And so there was a time in my life where I had to go through the furnace. It didn't feel good. It hurt. It was painful, the most painful time of my life. But I realized through that process there were some thoughts that I had to let go of. I thought I was right. I knew it. I was still a teenager, still knew everything. Hello? But if I didn't let go of those weights, lay them aside, I would have never flew where God wanted me to fly. I would have never got off the ground. Just like with the Hebrew boys, God met me in the fiery furnace. Hello? Some of you got a similar story, I know that. See, over the years I've learned that that same fire that I thought came to destroy me didn't come to destroy me. It came to make me stronger. It came to make me fly.
Yes, Lord.
One thing I've learned about the process is, as long as you're complaining, you stay in the fire. Oh God, it's hot. Why? Are you real? Are you still out there? You know what? The fire goes up a little more. But if you let it go, listen to what I found. You know, sometimes we get into the midst of a place where we need a supernatural healing. You cannot get a supernatural response from God complaining in the natural.
Well, all right.
Hello? We need an above natural God to meet us where we are. We have to speak an above natural faith. In the midst of the fire, we begin to say, thank you, God, for bringing me out of this. Thank you that when I come out, I'm going to be stronger. I don't know how you're going to do it, but this fire is not stopping me.
Thank you, Lord.
Somebody say, now that's faith.
That's faith.
Listen to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. I'm going to read from the Living Bible. These trials are only to test your faith, to see whether or not it is strong and pure. It is being tested as fire tests gold and purifies it. And your faith is far more precious to God than mere gold. So if your faith remains strong after being tried in the test tube of fiery trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day of his return. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
I remember back when I was a teenager, still knew everything. It was my second year of high school. And by then, it was the most painful season of my life. What I'm about to share with you, I didn't go into detail in my book. Talked about it a little bit. It seemed like that season would never end. And the neighborhood I grew up in, it was bad enough. There were trials within, trials without. How many of you know what I'm talking about? And it was from the time I was about 11 or 12, our home changed. The environment changed in our home, and a system of abuse began. And it was very difficult for many years. I don't believe I was 50 years old before I even talked about this. Now, I'm not talking about correction. I mean, at this point, when I share parts of this, people say, yeah, we all got spanked. I'm not talking about. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. That's not what we're talking about here, and that's all I want to say about that at this time. But it was a time in my life when ideas were shaping, and in my heart of hearts, I believed that God must be real, but I cried out one day and I asked God, God, if you're real, how come I've never met anybody that believes in you? Never. Didn't know anybody that had faith. The Bible was outlawed in my home. That's the home I grew up in. It was literally outlawed. Things were getting to a breaking point. Something had to change. I was about to yield to the fire. Right at that time, and this is not in my book, a new semester was beginning at my school, and I got this English teacher. She was an elderly woman, and her name was Mrs. Holland. Her desk was like this, and my desk was right here. I don't remember if there was somebody, whether I was the first or second desk to her desk, but I was right here. And off to the side behind us were the windows of the classroom. Out those windows, you could see the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, the New York City skyline. It was the most majestic, beautiful view anybody can go to school and in. And I got to walk in that class every day and look out at the skyline, take the seat, sat down. I remember the first day sitting down, Mrs. Holland's class, brand new teacher. She told us a little bit about herself, and then she took this box of books and she set it down on her desk. Boom. She said these were our textbooks for the semester. She said, because of all the new laws and all the lawsuits going against teachers, now she said, I am not allowed to share my faith with you. She said, it's against the law. But she said, nobody could stop me as an English teacher from using the Bible as my textbook. It was the first time I ever held the Bible in my hand. I felt the weight of that book. And I didn't know what was in it, but I felt the hope that was in it. Do y'all understand what I'm saying here? I didn't know the New Testament from the Old. I didn't know what was in the book. But I was excited, and I began to look forward to every day. We didn't get to take those books home. I didn't get to search through it and read it out and find Jesus. No, I didn't do that. She started with the book of Genesis, and every day we'd come in as a class and we'd take turns and we'd read a little bit from the Bible. And then at the end, we'd close the books and she'd collect them all again. Every day I looked forward to her class, mostly because I was curious. What's all this hubbub about the Bible? A few months into that class, I don't believe we had finished reading the book of Genesis yet. We're still at the very beginning. I walked into her classroom and there was a substitute teacher. And that teacher told us that Mrs. Holland was taking a little time off, that she'd be back shortly. Months went by. I believe about 4 months. I kept asking, well, when is Mrs. Holland going to get back? See, that substitute teacher had her own curriculum. We were no longer reading from the Bible. I was missing that. I didn't know it. I didn't know why. So I asked the substitute teacher one day, have you heard from Mrs. Holland? She said, son, Mrs. Holland just lost her battle to cancer. She won't be coming back. I was devastated. First, because I'd come to love this dear teacher. But second, it was the only time of the day where I got to put my hands on hope. I didn't understand how. I didn't understand why. We hadn't even finished reading the Bible. We had just started. My trial wasn't over, and then here's where it picks back up in my book. You can read the things that I went through after that. Finally, I gave my life to the Lord, and I was able to buy a Bible of my own. Now, when I tell her story, an obvious question that comes to mind is, where was God? Why didn't He save her? Why didn't her faith save her? But I'm here today to tell you that's not Mrs. Holland's story. That's not her story at all. See, in spite of knowing that her time was short, what you might have done and what I might have done, I might have bought a ticket and gone to Paris. Because there's things on my bucket list that have not been checked off yet.
Well,
are you with me this morning? Somebody said, not Paris. They got other places they will go to. But instead of taking those precious last moments she had on this earth for herself and her family, she chose to defy the New York City school system and bring Bibles into a classroom full of the next generation and give them hope.
glory to God.
That's Mrs. Holland's office. I'm so thankful today.
Yes, amen.
back when I needed to know if God was real. There was so much. We all are seeing this violence going on. I lived with that growing up in New York. Hardly a day went by when somebody in our neighborhood didn't get killed, gunned down. I needed to know that God was real. Never thought about these things before the headlines of the last week. But I do got to say, if it had not been for Mrs. Holland, my books would have never been written. I don't know why this cancer thing is growing in our society today. I don't know why there's all these school shootings, this one and that one. But one thing I do know, church, is that just like with Miss Holland's class, it is not time to take a sabbatical. Because times are tough and time is winding down. It's not time for people of faith to say, well, you know what? I'm just going to go out and cruise and have a good time before it's too late. It's not time for us to say, woe is me. It is time to say, look at God and share your faith the way Mrs. Holland did. Whoever will listen, it's time to affect the next generation with everything left within us. Somebody say, lay aside
Such an
everything.
awesome God. Such an awesome God.
There's no impurities, no doubt.
Such an awesome God. Such an awesome God. Such an awesome God. Isn't He a worthy God? Such an awesome God. Such an awesome God. Such an